and welcome back to my corner of the internet. I'm Shannon, and tonight I've got another book talk video to share with you guys. And tonight we are finally talking about Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno-Garcia. This book has been on my to-read pile for months, and I kept putting it off, which was weird because when it was released, I was in such a panic to purchase it and read it. But then once I finally had it, I kept putting it off because I knew I was gonna love it and I didn't want to have already read it too soon. Does that make sense to you? I know that sounds weird, but when I'm really anticipating a book, I dread having finished reading it. Anyway, it's weird, I know, but I finally read it and I really enjoyed it. If you've been around my channel for a while, you know that I love haunted house stories. I love any sort of ghost story, but especially haunted house stories. They just strike a chord with me and they scare me so much, but I just love them. And this was that. It's a haunted house story. It's a ghost story. It's a family dysfunction story. It just basically checks every single box that I have when deciding to read a book. So I've literally avoided reviews, other booktubers talking about it. I avoided everything I possibly could to just keep the reading of this entirely my own experience. Anyway, so what I'll do is I will give you a little blurb and then we'll talk a bit more about it. I'm not going to go through it piece by piece like I do with some of my book talk videos, only because I feel like if I did that, I'd be doing you a disservice, because I feel like it would sound insane. Like if I was just telling you parts of the book, I feel like you'd be like, that sounds crazy. And it does a disservice to the novel because it's so good. So we're not going to do that. But here we go. Mexican Gothic is about a family. It takes place in the 1950s in Mexico. Although one of the families, or the main family that we deal with, they're actually English and like from England. So anyway, our main character, her name is Noami. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I asked my husband, who grew up in America, how he would pronounce that because he took Spanish in school, and he told me Noami, and I googled it, and that's the translation I got as well, or not translation, but pronunciation that I got. So if that's wrong, please kindly and gently let me know in the comments. But so Noami, she's a beautiful young woman. She lives with her father. She's got a man that she's going to parties with. Not her official boyfriend, but they're having a great time. He's handsome. She's beautiful. She's really just living sort of the life of a socialite in Mexico City. One night she returns home from a party and her father tells her that he's received a letter from her beloved cousin, Catalina. Now, not too long ago, Catalina had married a man named Virgil, and she had moved to his home. He didn't live in the city, he lived somewhere else, and he lived in, you know, a grand Gothic mansion with many members of his family. His family used to own a mine, but that eventually shut down, and she had gone to live with him. But Noami's father had received a letter from Catalina that really disturbed him. Basically, the letter contained a lot of disjointed and disturbing thoughts from Catalina about how the house she was living in was haunted. There was something in the walls. She could hear voices. It was just a very unsettling letter. And so Noami's father decides that the best course of action immediately is for her to go there and see for her own eyes that everything's okay with her cousin, see how the marriage is, see what the family's like, see if she needs psychiatric help. And, you know, he thought that she would be the best one to go and do that because she had a close relationship with Catalina when they were little girls. And, you know, they used to play together and spend time together, and they both love fairy tales, Catalina especially. And so he tells her, you know, go and then report back to me how everything is going. From there, Naomi goes up to the house, and she's instantly kind of struck by it. It's this large Gothic mansion, and inside, once she goes inside, she's just very, very unsettled by it. And not only by it, by the people who live there. There are a lot of weird rules in the house. Like, there's no talking allowed at the dinner table at dinner time. There's no talking allowed. They have to eat in silence. So, you know, picture this large dining room table with many people seated. Imagine this large dining room table with many people seated around it, and none of them are speaking. And when Naomi tries to start a conversation, she's shut down, and she just finds it really weird, and it just doesn't feel right to her. Meanwhile, when she tries to see her cousin, she's told that she can only see her at certain times. And when she finally does get in to see her, it's not the woman that she remembers. And she begins to get very concerned. And eventually her cousin tells her of a sort of, I don't know what you call, natural practitioner, witch doctor, whatever. She wants her to go to this woman and get a herbal remedy that she had been taking before that had seemed to help a bit. Because the family, the Doyles, they have this doctor, and that's the only doctor that they'll really listen to or let come to the house. Although eventually Naomi does convince them to let her bring one of the other local doctors in, but it doesn't go well. So from there, the story goes on to unfold and show us who this family is, who the Doyles are. And as it does, it gets so dark and so gruesome that the whole time I was reading, I just felt like there was an umbrella of dread hovering over me. With every page I turned, I kept wondering what's going to happen. What's going to happen? Because once Naomi gets settled in, she starts having these really vivid, really terrifying dreams in which the walls and the mold that's on the walls, because this house is just reeking of neglect. That's even the word the author uses in the book. It's neglect. It's drenched in neglect. You know, it could be a beautiful house, but it just isn't because nobody's taking care of it. Even though many generations of this family not only have lived in this house, but currently are living in this house. We have like 3 generations in there. And she starts having these really vivid dreams involving, you know, what she thinks is a haunting. She's seeing the ghosts of family members that she's learned about that have passed. She's watching the walls and the wallpaper sort of come alive. And during some moments I had recollections too when we read The Yellow Wallpaper. There's a video on my channel where I read that whole short story. So if you're familiar with that story, you know what I'm talking about. If you're not, definitely go and give it a listen because it's a great short story. It's not too long, but it's very creepy. And so when Naomi was talking about the walls, that's what I would think of, was the yellow wallpaper. And she began sleepwalking again for the first time since she was a young girl. And she begins to just have really disturbing thoughts about one member of the family in particular. And so this whole story is just a mystery of unraveling what's going on in this house. what is the root of the problems in this house? And like I said, it's just a feeling of dread that comes over you as you're reading it. And it's an intense feeling. I would say if you're easily disturbed by gruesome's the word that comes to mind. Is it violent? Briefly at the end, but there are just some scenes that are so unsettling and so disturbing that really get under your skin. I've thought about it nonstop since I finished reading it. And the way Silvia wrote this book, it feels like an old time, like an old-fashioned, long ago written Gothic horror novel. Not just because it takes place in the 50s, but just the style of writing, the way the story unfolds, the way the house unfolds. I just thought it was so good and so perfectly written. I've since learned that Silvia has a ton, well, ton's a bit dramatic, but she has a bunch of other books out, and I can't wait to read them. And I think she has a new one coming out soon, which I will definitely be picking up, because she's just such a very talented writer. And what's interesting as well is she currently, and I think for a while, she actually lives in Canada. She lives in British Columbia. So I thought that was very interesting, being Canadian as well. I always love when I read an excellent book written by another author in Canada. So there you go, you guys. I think that sums it up pretty well. It was scary. It was gruesome. It was well written. It's this beautifully crafted Gothic horror novel where the house itself is a character. And I love that, because sometimes it's a haunted house story and the house doesn't really, you know, you don't get too attached to the house. It doesn't seem as though it's its own character. But I just love it so much when the house is a character in the story as well. And this is one of those books where the house is definitely a character, a very important character. And the more you find out about this house as the story unravels, the more intense it gets. And it's just so great. So for Mexican Gothic, having finally read it, after gazing upon its beautiful cover for many months, I would definitely recommend. It's so good. It's well written. No matter what, even if you don't love the subject matter, it's to me, it's very well written. And I can't wait to read other books by Silvia. I think she's a great author. So I hope you guys are having a fantastic weekend. And I'll talk to you again real soon. Bye, guys.